Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of ReelwUrld's The Value Add Podcast. I'm your host, Jan Lucanus, founder and CEO of ReelwUrld, and we are always bringing on amazing people for all of us to learn from. And one of the most amazing people in my life, personally, as a friend, as a mentor, and as now a ReelwUrld advisor, has been Barry Navidi, an amazing producer, and just an amazing human being that has consistently given me some of the most insightful guidance in navigating the Hollywood system that I've ever encountered. And I'm just so honored to have you here, Barry. Thank you so much for making time for this, because I know you're super busy, and it's just you're a legend, and it's just amazing to have you here.
Well, thank you for such a beautiful, kind introduction. I think I should pay you a little bit more money later under the table for that beautiful intro. But you're very kind. Look, it's been great following your journey for the last I don't know. I think we've known each other for almost over a decade now.
Yes,
maybe even longer. I don't know. But yeah, it's a pleasure and honor to be here with you.
And for those who don't know, a big shout out to one of my best friends in the world, Mercer Buffy, who introduced Barry and I. And it's been amazing. It's been amazing the level of support, love, clarity that you've given me. And I've there's always, I got a comment from one of our co-founders on here about how efficient our conversations are. And like, you're really, really great at organizing information and knowing exactly what needs to be said when, and to optimize time. And that's something that I always look to do in my own life. But that always leaves me wanting more Barry. And I think that this is a great opportunity for me to start asking some of those questions that I've always want to know, which I think really just starts with, can you tell us about where you grew up? Like your
Well, I grew up. I mean, I was born in Iran, and I grew up with a great, loving, privileged family. I was very lucky. My dad, always loved cinema, entertainment, even though he was in politics. But he always continually supported me, even at the age of 10 or 11. I remember when I was a kid watching The Godfather, in our house, because we had a projector. My dad was a fanatic with movies, so once in a while we used to show movies. Of course, I remember as a kid The Godfather, when Marlon Brando, all that. But I grew up as a kid in Iran, and then of course at age of 12, 13, my dad sent all the kids, sisters and brothers up, like 4 of us, couple of sisters and a brother, and we all went to UK for further education and boarding in school and so on and so forth. So really, I started as a kid, growing up in a family that I was given the go ahead and kind of learn and study and how cinema and photography and so forth, because a lot of my own contemporaries as a kids, and especially back home in Iran, you're either an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or a science or whatever. But filmmakers, was always a taboo. That why would you want to be a film director or producer or cameraman or so forth? So I was kind of quite lucky that my dad was very supportive of what I wanted to do, even at the age of 10.
That's amazing. So you were focused on actually learning filmmaking from 10?
Yeah, that's when my dad got the cameras, 8mm cameras, and I was always filming and shooting things. I mean, it was like I had the basically the learning ground from my dad. And my dad loved movies anyway. As a kid, he was also working as an editor, young editor. He was very young before he got into politics. So he had the passion and he passed it on, because it really makes a big difference when your family is, your dad, your mom, and everyone is kind of encouraging you rather than discouraging. Because as I said, in the old days back in Iran, I don't think it was fashionable to say I want to be a filmmaker or director or producer or whatever. So yeah.
This is a lot of folks may not know this, so I think this is really important to highlight. You, iconic producer John Huston became one of your mentors, and so how did you go from? And I have a bunch of folks like this in my network who, or should I say, not a bunch, a handful, who have been training. I consider it training in filmmaking from 9, 10 years old, and how powerful that is when you're touching any aspect of the industry over a long period of time, and how it affects you in just how you can navigate as you're older, as you get older. So I'm interested in how those seeds translated into you having one of the most iconic producers as your mentor.
Well, you have to be lucky. I mean, as much as I was, when I went to the film school in London, and London Film School is one of the oldest film school in the world, especially in Europe. At the time, I wanted to be there and accepted there because it was very tough to get in. And again, my earlier on as a kid, because my dad gave me the camera and started learning photography and filming and all that stuff as a young kid. So by the time I got to the film school, I kind of had some material and some short films to show to get in, because it was a postgraduate course. And in other words, you have to have an undergraduate degree to get in. And I didn't have that. Quite frankly, I just wanted to do my photography and learn the craft of just filming on my own and life. And when I was in the film school, I just, by sheer luck, I met Danny Huston. And he and I just got to know each other. And I had no idea his father was the legendary director, John Huston. And 6 months into our friendship, I found out, in fact, who he was. And by then I was already kind of accepted in the family because we were working together in school. We were making little short films. I have to say, I really am a believer in faith and kind of luck, and which plays a big deal in my life, always have. I was there at the right place. It may sound like a cliche, but it's the fact. If I missed Danny Huston within 5 seconds or 10 seconds, I would have missed him. And we just kind of met and bumped to each other, in fact. And that's when our old, friendship began. And of course, by that time, I met his father, John Huston, who was, wow. I mean, the guy was like the Moses of the film business. He was one of the greatest directors from Maltese Falcone's first film. Before that, he, of course, wrote Jezebel, and it was a great screenwriter, High Sierra. So when I met with John, he was such a nice, sweet man. And he accepted me as a family as well, family member. So I kind of practically met everyone through John, and with my friendship with Danny, everyone who was anyone, whether it's Orson Welles, whether it's Fred Zinnemann, Billy Wilder, they used to hang around with John and just discuss filmmaking like we do today through social media. But in the old days, when I say old days, it's because I was 24, 25. I was young, very young. I was still kind of, learning. So I was very blessed just to be hanging around with John for 8 years, and at the same time meeting everyone in the business, mainly talent, writers and directors, and of course actors. And I produced his last 2 movies before he passed away, which Danny and I worked together very closely. Danny Huston, who later on became a wonderful actor, and he's still continuing to work, and we are best of friends,
That's as a film student myself, having gone to NYU, I can attest to how wonderful that journey can be to be able to work with to be able to work with friends and not know that, oh wow, that friend is actually like tied into this particular family legacy in Hollywood and cinema. I've had that experience myself, and how wonderful that can be at opening your eyes to a different way of viewing the business. and how to a certain extent that type of legacy, in my experience, would give me a sense of ease. It's like, oh, okay, well, this is work, of course, but let's look at it a different way, because I think that when you're, in my experience with, and this is one of the things we're working on with ReelwUrld, is to essentially cut a lot of the red tape out, to kind of remove some of these veils that are on the Hollywood system from the outside looking in. And I think that
Exactly.
by
Yeah, I mean, like it happened very organically. That's the
yeah,
whole beauty of it. I mean, I was in London, I wasn't in Hollywood. Kind of, we were two kids just basically working and making short films in the film school, and I couldn't have scripted better than this, rather than coming to Hollywood and meeting all these big players and all that, which was never on my card, and nor was I ever looking for that. So it's kind of, it came to me by, as I said, call it destiny or call it fate or a combination of luck. So that was my biggest. It was like winning a lottery. That was the beginning, kind of.
so that I find it very interesting that you say that was never your intention, because one of I consider you one of the jet setting advisors that we have. You are so
Yeah, it's a perception of it, but honestly, I never ever looked. When we met, you and I, call me a wiser guy or more experienced. If you hadn't, because you just become a member of the club. So I became a member of the club through one of the greatest film directors of all time, and then the rest of it, of course, you carry on, but you learn from your mentor, and he was my, the best mentor you can have. But you also learn from other great directors and writers and producers that you meet along the way, and you kind of sit back and listen to them. So when you and I met, already I had gained kind of experience. I don't want to call it that I was jaded. No, I'm never jaded, but when you're wiser and you're more experienced, things begin to look a little bit more like comfortable. And at the same time, you're more cool and relaxed about things. When I was younger, I was like I was ultra hyper. I was like a Ferrari. I mean, you have to have a Ferrari to catch up with me. That's how fast I was when it came to my passion of desire. But I was the same guy, except I was learning. I was inexperienced. I was like, you know, I mean, humility goes a long way, because you don't know anything you think you do, but at the same time, you just got to sit back sometimes, listen to some of these great filmmakers, and then capture and grab what you can, and then hopefully you try to steal ideas rather than copy. So which is always important. That Picasso used to say, "Steal, don't copy anyone." Stealing is difficult. Copying is easy. So you just kind of sit back and you learn from these people. I was very lucky, I have to say. I mean, it was like heaven. I would have rather be a film critic or just a writer, just hanging around with these guys, than trying to make a movie, because that's a different ball game. That's like going to war. But when you sit back and you observe them, is a joy, because there's no stress. You can just write your notes and learn, and then one day just put them down in writing. But when you go and trying to make a movie, that's just another, like in the film school, it was the zoo. So it was more controlled environment. You could take risks, chances. But the moment I graduated and I left the school, then that's when you're in the jungle. It's just like another beast.
That was Kurosawa says something similar. I'll misquote him, but essentially that running a film set is the closest thing to running an army. And
Yeah.
I love that quote. It's always helped me to sober myself when I get too excited or too anything when it comes to actually organizing a group of people to get a very particular campaign. Like the campaign has to be short and efficient to get the content.
Yeah, it is like running an army, except you are fighting at the same time. The battle starts, and then you want to win the battle, yet you're gonna lose a few, and then you're gonna win the war. Hopefully, it's like it becomes a really a struggle. That's why the beauty of art is show business. That's why they call it show business. Like Woody Allen said, if it wasn't show business, they call it show. because at the end of the day, you've got to deal with the commerce, the money, all that side of it. And then you got to deal with the art side of it. That's where there's a major conflict. And that's what you have to figure out as a filmmaker, that psychologically, how are you going to deal with the talent? And that's the hardest thing. That's what the easier thing is in the world, in our business, is to do animation. Why? Because you storyboard. You very much work on the script from page one. You can revoice the actors. You don't like a character, you can tear them up. You know, you can rewrite it. When it comes to movies, you're dealing with human beings, which can be all characters from Succession. That's what you're up against. Those kind of characters. They'll do anything to just create havoc and problems, and that's what. But that's the joy of filmmaking. But going back to when you and I met, was because you know, yeah, I was jet setting by then because I was making a couple of movies and going back and forth. But I was still kind of based in London. If you notice, I'm here in LA. I've got a base here, but I was very much grounded in Europe because I see myself as a European filmmaker. I've just happened to be in Hollywood, in the box, out of the box, in the box, out of the box, but never totally in the box with the formula, because you just have to have the temperament as a filmmaker to be able to deal with that. I never had that from a young kid, and I just didn't want to be part of that club. And that's because my mentors like John Huston and others, they really taught me how to stay away from that. At the same time, stick your head in there once in a while. And that was the biggest advice I got from John.
What the biggest advice in terms of staying, not getting too involved in either ecosystem, staying between?
Yes, yeah, it's just try to check the reality box, you know, because Hollywood is Hollywood. They make great films, great filmmakers. I mean, all of that, but you don't want to be a member of so much hype that can drag you in. It's like a tsunami coming at you, and you don't want to swim with that, because you either get lost or you're going to get drowned. So you got to find a way to, you know, swim away from it and do your thing. So that's why I never ever wanted to, never had that in me. I've got to compete with this filmmaker or that filmmaker. So from earlier on as a kid, as a young filmmaker, I was kind of trained. Why am I going to make this film? What's the reason you're going to do that? Just ask yourself why. There's nothing wrong with making anything you want to make, as long as you ask why. Because you know what? With all due respect to great artists, painters, Picassos, who are great artists, they can do a painting in 5 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe a couple of months. With filmmaking is like a long-term relationship. And that long-term relationship, it better work. So you better find that way of the direction of why you're going to go through all this. As a film producer, I'm talking about. It's one thing as a filmmaker. It's one thing you're an actor and you come on and work for 2 weeks in the production. It's another you have to work as a filmmaker, director, producer for 2 years to give birth to a movie. So you better have a reason. And that's why, again, as a young kid, I was taught by these great mentors of mine. I have patience. I always tell other young filmmakers out there, you know, they always ask me, how you? I said, because I'm not rushing. I'm not rushing to put my name on a picture if I don't have the right director to direct the picture. So this is me talking now in the last 15 years. I probably would be in a different position when I was younger, because I would be desperate just to make a film, and I get it. You want to kind of be there and make something. So these mentors of mine, so by the time you and I met, at least I had something to say to you. You know, I've learned a lot by just observing, you know, it's a wonderful, beautiful film artists, you know.
Are there any other mentors that you would name outside of John Huston?
Well, Huston was like a Moses of mentors. I mean, even when Billy Wilder would, absolutely. I mean, I see them quite often because they loved John. John was a maverick filmmaker, whereas Billy Wilder was a great writer director, but that's what Billy Wilder would sit and talk to you about, whereas John Huston would talk to you about how he went to Africa and made African Queen, not because of the script, because he wanted to be on location in the middle of the jungle. And at the time, nobody was doing that during the 50s. everything was on in the studio. So yes, they all have I always ask questions from Billy Wilder or Orson Welles, especially with Billy Wilder with comedies, because he was master of that. But yeah, I mean, they a lot of actors, of course. I mean, Paul Newman, all of these great artists that I hang around with when I could. Burgess Meredith. I mean, Paul Scofield, who I worked with, and I loved Paul, one of the greatest English actors of all time. But sometimes, you just listen to their stories. You don't have to even ask any questions. You just listen to what they have to say, and then you pick things and you say, okay. Marlon Brando, of course. I mean, at some point when after I got to know John, I met Marlon, and then of course, Al Pacino. So it goes on, but it's never. I mean, like, you always have to pinch yourself when you work with such great actors and great artists, no matter how old you are, because when you are lucky enough to work in the environment in this business, that will enable you to kind of open your eyes, and your vision is priceless to work with these people. That's why we want to work with the best of the best. Nothing like it.
So I love talking about excellence and how excellence translates into practical application. That's something that I focus on in pretty much all areas of my life, but martial arts is really what taught me how to do that, working with some of the best in the world in what I do for Tai Chi, etc. So I'm wondering, because you've worked with so many amazing people, including, I'm interested in the path that how did you practically apply being around all this excellence into actually making movies?
That's a good question. I mean, I get asked this question quite often. One of the and this comes organically. I don't really. I mean, you are a martial artist. You are organized, disciplined, in a different way that is unique. In my my world, when I met, for example, someone like Marlon Brando, after a while, when I was, you hang around John Huston long enough, you practically meet everyone from presidents to other big stars, Jack Nicholson and so forth, right? So that's how I met Brando, through Huston and Jack Nicholson, because they were neighbors, Jack and Marlon. With Marlon, the first thing he looked at me when I met him, he didn't see me as a Hollywood producer, because he didn't like Hollywood anyway. He didn't have, anything to do with, producers. He saw me as an underdog, Iranian, Anglophile, Americanized producer, filmmaker, whatever you want to say. I would say rather filmmaker than the title producer, because what does that mean? And and the psychology of really the trick is, these are artists and they want to be heard. And I sat back and I acted like a therapist, seriously, rather than enforcing myself. Look, I'm going to make this movie. It's going to be this, that. I never forget once when I had a project. I didn't have a project, but there was a project that I was attached at the time. I was like 30. This is 30 years ago, by the way. Like John Huston, before he passed away, there was a great project called Benito Cereno, and this was based on Herman Melville, who wrote Moby Dick, and of course John Huston was going to direct this movie with Paul Newman, and Paul Heller was a producer, and John wanted me to be the co-producer and work with Paul, and he wanted me to be part of the whole thing. I said, great, what an honor. Sadly, John Huston passed away, and we stopped. But I did call Paul Newman, and I said, can we talk about this? He said, come by and let's have lunch together in Connecticut. So I flew from London to Connecticut, and I sat with him. He was such a sweet, great guy. He said to me, look, I know I dragged you all the way from London, but I just wanted to tell you, I know you have the passion. I know John loved you, and you really have a good eye, but you have to grow up before you can make and produce a movie like Benito Cereno. And you haven't grown up yet. He wasn't insulting me, he was telling me the truth. Because as a filmmaker, you have to know when you make, as a producer, it's not like someone just goes out and raises the money and says, hey, let's go and make. No, that's like, everybody can do that. We were trying to make a picture that had so much depth and profound and got message, and you name it. And I realized, wow, I never forgot that. He said, you got to grow up. You haven't grown up yet to make a picture like Benito Cereno. So when I made The Merchant of Venice, by the time I was 43 years old, I made that picture with my eyes closed because I was grown up. I knew how to handle that picture. So in other words, as a filmmaker, you have to be prepared to know what you can make. Even when if you do a movie as commercial, as fun as Jackass the movie, you better know what you're doing because those guys go out there and make a film that's working in their own, in their own world. So I'm not condescending anyone or saying, hey, I'm just saying certain movies, you have to be ready. And that's what being around these great mentors. And I never forgot that. Because, just by saying that to me, I realized, wow, okay, so I'm not prepared for this. My heart is prepared for this, but my mind is not there yet. That's what you have to sometimes pick and choose. And I have the patience, and I take my time, and I don't rush because I want to put my name on a movie. No. So that's why I kind of pick my battles carefully.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really, really powerful. And I want to, for anyone who's listening, I want to connect the dots here from what I see in culture. I believe the entire world is in film school right now. That's a big, part of the foundational ethos for ReelwUrld. And because TikTok and all social media, et cetera, people are picking up their phones and they're shooting stuff and they're learning about what a dolly zoom is. And they're learning like shot language, and they're learning camera effects, and they're having fun with it. But what this really is a communication tool. And it's really interesting to look at the evolution of social media now, how filmmaking ties into that. And to hear a comment like that, because you can feel it in, for example, a YouTube video versus a film production or a show production, and the difference of depth. And it's not necessarily the production value, meaning how much is spent and how many people worked on it, but it's actually the depth of the creator's understanding, the filmmaker's understanding of what the moments mean and what is being conveyed by the combination of performance, camera positioning, editing, sound design, etc. And to be able to guide that process as a producer or director is so important. So I definitely, I know from myself, from being 20 years old, doing a subject matter that was beyond my years, and getting a strong response from it, but also being able to look back on it and say, oh wow, I missed all of this in that moment, in that shot. All of this from this performance, I could have asked for this, and I could have asked for that would have given so much more clarity to the emotional space of this particular character in this moment, and how that connects later on in the film, and being able to tie all this together. So it's really interesting hearing someone tell you that when it is something that is usually so subtle. And is not spoken about a lot when it comes to the general understanding of what it means to make a movie or make a show or to just shoot something. And so I think
exactly. It's passion and desire is one thing, but quality versus quantity is another. And also you have to be prepared. I mean, that's what the whole conversation was with Paul at the time. You're not prepared yet. Not yet. One day you will be. I mean, I could, with our life, you go through everything. That's why, when you're wiser, it doesn't mean you're old. It means you have experience. That's priceless. And my desire and passion is the same. It's just I kind of react to it differently now than 30 years ago. But I still look at talent. I still look at great actors out there, young actors, brilliant. Looking always for discovering a great director, young director out there. Of course, there's a lot of talent, but you have to understand today you have it's like a million of sperm and one egg. They all want to get into it, but you have a shot at getting into it because you have streamers, you have YouTube, you have this, you have that. You can be TikTok, you can make 1.5 minute short film and give your message. I mean, today is like, all the gloves are off. Go for it. Whereas in my time was Still slightly different. You want to make a film. Okay, you're going to shoot it on what? 35 millimeter. Yes. Wow. Not 16 millimeter, whatever. Today, nobody cares what you shoot on at the end of the day. You know, whether you shoot on 35, 70 millimeter or your Sony high definition, the audiences are more forgiving, and they just look at the content and what you have. But you've got to have that patience and be able to accept sometimes that you're not ready. You're not ready. Don't just do it because you're desperate of, and I learned that again from, I always had that patience in me, maybe because it's part of my DNA. It's partly my own character. I'm not saying everybody has that, but certainly it worked for me. What I'm saying is it worked for me because I wasn't looking for it. My dad said to me when I was a kid, and when I looked at The Godfather, I didn't get it. I watched it. I was a kid. So I said, wow, what a movie, Marlon Brando. Little did I know, not only I work with Brando, I ended up working with Al Pacino. I mean, I think you have a better shot at winning a lottery than working as an Iranian filmmaker wannabe and, working with those two giants. What's that all about? Luck? Whatever. I mean, I don't know. That's why I think it's a lot of it is to do with you and your personality. It's not about just talent. Yeah, I've got 30, 40% talent. I know, but the much better producers than me out there that don't have that kind of opportunity and luck. Seriously. So it's not all about, hey, this guy is so talented. No, because I'm not a painter. I'm not I'm a manager. I have to manage everybody together. That's, I guess, maybe the talent I learned from my dad, because that's what he used to do. In a sense, manage, but a lot of it is, my friend, a lot of it is luck. Al Pacino always said to me, if I didn't make my first 5 movies, I don't know where I'd be. So greatest actor of today's living icon that I love, with friends and everything, and boy, every day you learn from this man who is a pure artist, because in definition of a dictionary, Al Pacino equal artist / passion, all this above. I mean, so how did that happen? I never expected it, but sometimes things come to your direction and you just got to be prepared how you grab it, I guess.
So how did you and Al come together, and what was your first project?
Well, I met Al through Brando, really, because I offered, I got to know Marlon, and then Marlon said to me, I said to Marlon at the time, look, I want to make a movie, because we had a picture together it took me 4 years to put together, and sadly it collapsed 2 weeks into production. This was with Brando, Johnny Depp, Deborah Winger. It was my second film. It was a big movie for me, and I had big major stars. Somehow, miraculously, I got them together, and the finance fell out. Whatever. Long story, but I'm sure your listeners can check the picture, the idea, and the story behind it. Divine Rapture is all over the internet, anyhow. But what happened with that is I got to know Marlon. If you talk about fate and destiny, when my movie collapsed, I became closer to Brando. I don't know what would have happened if I had finished the picture. I don't know. Certainly, I can tell you one thing. If I had finished the picture, there's no way I would have worked with Al Pacino. It wasn't going to happen. So that much I do know, that something happens that you don't expect. To call it failure, if you like, whatever you want to call that. But then something positive happens from the other side, which is, wow, maybe there is a God up there, perhaps saying, okay, I'm going to help you. And what happened was that with Brando, after we got to know each other, I said, I want to make a movie that is a little kind of about toleration, about going one step too far. He said, well, why don't you make The Merchant of Venice? I said, what? Shakespeare? I don't do Shakespeare. He said, well, look, if I were you, I would do this one, because nobody has ever done a feature version of The Merchant of Venice, and nobody will ever going to do that. Television, theater, plays, yes, but not as a feature. I said, wow, that's a big production, though. shooting in Venice. He said, well, look, I'm going to introduce you to Al Pacino. He's the one who should play Shylock. Because I offered Marlon to play Shylock. He said, no, I'm not going to do Shakespeare. And then I met Al. He was in the middle of doing Insomnia. And he said, can you wait a couple of years? I said, well, Shakespeare waited 450 years. I'll wait a couple more years for you. And that's what our bromance began. Because I loved Al when I met him. There's no one like Al. And then we made the picture in 2004. And we miraculously managed to do it. It was great actors with Jeremy Irons. And that's how we met. And we became kind of partners, friends, and as far as doing projects, developing projects together to this date. We've been together now kind of as friends and confidant and relationship for almost 20 years now. Yeah, it's been one of those, just trying to make sure that the battery is working.
This is amazing, and I'm wondering, you spoke about. I'm looking up Insomnia too while we're talking here, because I was
right.
I remember I got offered a role in a film that I believe Pacino was in, and this was with I know De Niro was in it, and I was supposed to get beat up, but I had to lose a bunch of weight and play a crackhead, and I was like, you know what? No, I'm not going to do that. But it was a really nice offer. It was from Randy Hiller, who's now I believe the VP of casting for Disney. She casted Iron Man, the first Iron Man.
Right.
And so, and pretty much every Marvel film. So, but I remember her, I was sitting in her office. She's like, hey, you want this role? So I'm like, oh, you know what? I think for a bunch of principal reasons, I won't be able to take that, but thank you. So I'm wondering if the film was Insomnia, but this was like 2006. So I don't think so.
No, that must have been another picture, because I was with Al at the time. We ended up doing, together. We did Salome and Wild Salome, which took about 8 years, because Al was directing. That's when he discovered Jessica Chastain. And while we were in post-production, cutting the picture, because we didn't have a script. And I don't advise anybody to start a movie without a script unless you're Al Pacino. So that took a long, long time for us to put together. But whilst we were post-production and cutting the picture and trying to write the script in post-production, that's when Al was showing the script, the cut to many, many, many top stars and directors, and they were all hiring Jessica Chastain. In essence, really, one of the best performances, I have to say, Jessica Chastain gave, and that's what really got her all those big parts. Tree of Life. I mean, Terry Malick fell in love with Jessica's performance in Salome.
What was the catalyzing film again? The film that they were showing and writing the script in post? Could you repeat that?
Well, that's the movie that Al and I were working, Wild Salome and Salome, yes. The docudrama, and that took about 8 years, from beginning till the end, because we had two movies.
I missed the premiere.
Remember that? Yeah. So that's like a picture that I always jokingly say Al Pacino is the only American that took an Iranian me as a hostage. So because I had no choice but to be part of the journey, and I loved it, and it was one of the best time of my life, and the result of it, I think Al has done a masterpiece, and I urge your fans to, if they get a chance, to go to Apple or Amazon to watch Wild Salome, which is a journey of Al Pacino and discovering Oscar Wilde while trying to put on a play in Los Angeles. I mean, really, that was a journey that I'll never forget. It was fantastic.
Oh, I'll definitely I will put that on the queue this evening.
Yeah, that the people should see that. I mean, it's a movie to be seen because it's unique, it's original. It's Al Pacino in it, directing it, everything. It's amazing.
So going back to Divine Rapture, I'm not sure. I want to make sure I have. You've told me stories about this in the past, but one point stuck out to me in particular that I've thought about for years. And if I recall correctly, you were saying that you beat cancer, and what was it during that time?
No, it was Divine Rapture when the picture collapsed. it took me about a year or so to kind of recover from it. I left London for US for LA because I was given a green card, and I got to know. I used to see Marlon quite often because he was keep telling me. Marlon was keep telling me, let's go back and revive the picture. I said, Marlon, it's like, I can't do it. I mean, I lost everything. I went bankrupt, and I said, come on, it's like raising the Titanic. I mean, it sank. Let it sink for a while. I'm not ready for it. And then whilst I was going through that, I had cancer. So it was after Divine Rapture. So it took me about a year to recover from that, which was in 1998, 1999. So I was kind of going through all that, and really, in reality, from the time my movie collapsed, Divine Rapture, until I kind of recovered and everything, and I was getting offers a lot in LA. I mean, that's the one thing I love about Hollywood or about America overall. It's like they even get so impressed when you have a failure. In England they said, hey, you failed. Here they're saying, hey, you're in front cover of LA Times. That's not a failure. I mean, I was a few times in front cover of a few papers. I mean, major calendar. And they said, wow, Brando, this collapsed. Okay, so what? Do you want to direct or produce this movie? I said, thanks a lot, but I'm not ready for that. I'm trying to recover. That took about 3 or 4 years to kind of figure out what happened to me, because honestly, it was a bit of a shock. And yet Marlon and I became close. And that's when I started working on Merchant of Venice. So in a sense, just to go from Brando to Pacino was like winning a couple of lottery tickets again. It's like he resurrected my career in many ways. I wasn't like going to say, well, I'm going to make a picture now. I wasn't kind of even interested at that moment. But the moment I met Al, that was like, okay, wow, all right. And I did make the picture, and I dedicated to Marlon, because Marlon died 2004. And I finished the film and premiered in London, Merchant of Venice, end of 2004, early 2005. So, Divine Rapture. And by the way, I am resurrecting the picture because I have the screenplay. I've got the rights to the movie. So I'm going to resurrect the movie 20 couple of years later, whatever it is, 23 years later. I'm resurrecting it, meaning I'm recasting it. I'm going to do it. It's kind of, for me, the full circle. I want to go back to Ireland and finish what I didn't finish. So I'm looking forward to that in the near future.
So what would you say is your favorite film that you've ever worked on? Because you speak about these very passionately.
Well, I worked on a lot of projects, even some of the ones that I didn't produce. I was blessed enough to be part of production, but I have to say, one of the most, I would say my favorite, because I know we made legacy here, and I know it's going to be here for a long time, is The Merchant of Venice. Look, we got King Lear that we were working on, Al and I, to do in the near future, because Al's going to be phenomenal as King Lear. But The Merchant of Venice is not a picture that you can just go out there and make a remake with somebody. It's hard to get these big stars together and go to Venice independently and make a picture. So I'm very proud of Merchant of Venice. And sorry, I'm very proud of The Merchant of Venice, and that to me is one of my, I don't know how many. Hopefully I've got a few other pictures left in me, but that I'm never going to forget. And of course, the journey of going with Al Pacino together for 8 years. I mean, I'm talking about 8 years nonstop together, working with him on Wild Salome, and Salome is priceless. It's absolutely priceless. It's like 10 movies in one. Dealing with Al, working with Al, because it's like, with Al, it's like you contaminate art. Once I said to him, "You're giving me a heart attack," he said, "No, I'm giving you art attack, not heart attack." I said, "You're right. I see your point." So just being with Al,
You have to use that one.
being with him, working with him for all these years, almost 20 years now, is just priceless. It really is. I mean, there's nobody like him. And I've been around, and I worked with a lot of great actors, and there are a lot of great actors, but there's nobody like him. Nobody. I can really say that because I worked with Brando, and Al was, something else.
So Barry, I've seen you as a producer. You know, and I want to talk about how wonderfully supportive you've been of Justice for Hire in Real World. But I'm wondering, first and foremost, how do you've shown me different IPs that you're working on, different scripts, different projects.
Mhm.
What, how do you choose? How, what is your criteria? Is it just feeling, which is not just feeling, which is very powerful, or do you have a particular criteria to say, hey, you know what, I'm looking for this genre, I'm looking for this demographic. Like, well, how do you pick projects to work on, support, and bring to life?
Well, I think the story is important, but the genres that I look for uh, is generally projects that have element of human struggle, whether it's a comedy, dramedy, tragedy, whatever, action, um, and that's one of the criteria I have. I like to make a great thriller, but it's got to have a certain approach like The Usual Suspects when it was made at the time. Or I just don't want to go out there and make a thriller that has been cloned and everybody been copying. Or, I don't know how to read it, for example, a horror film. And I just don't know how to read. I've got to be able to know how to read and how to envisage how these filmmakers, some of them make these great horror films. So the genres that I look for are usually comedies, dramas, dramedies, and thrillers. Action pictures are very rare. When you and I met, it was the first time I was intrigued by your approach to martial art, and that really intrigued me. And at the same time, it was something new to me. So I was learning at the same time while you and I were swapping stories, and I was fascinated by that. And you had something as far as the character and the storytelling that you had. So that's very important to me. Look, there is no such thing as a perfect script. Like John Huston used to say, if there was one, why make it to a movie? Because the filmmaking is a craft, is a collaboration. If 80% you have a script that's working, the rest of it's up to director and the cast and production and so forth. So I've read scripts that are brilliant and turn out to be mediocre film because either the director was, not the right director, or the cast wasn't right. So it's important to get everything kind of to a point on paper. If it's not on paper, it's not going to be on screen. But by no means I'm saying that it's, even Bible gets rewritten. So scripts are there to be worked on, but somehow you feel the characters are working. So it's like reading a Mamet script, David Mamet. I mean, it kind of gets you into the character, the way you write, the way you get into it. Wow, I want to get into this. Like watching Succession. I know, one of the great television. It's because the way it's written, the characters. I mean, how many times you've seen actors or characters that are playing anti-heroes, bunch of assholes that you fall in love with, and that's writing, apart from acting. So this is amazing. That's what I love about writing. We have to respect writers. We have to respect writers because it starts with the writing, and then you hopefully as a producer, and then you pick your team, director, cast. If you get them all right, if you're lucky enough to get them right, you have a movie like The Godfather, which is the best movie of all time in the last 50 years. Talk about the 50th anniversary is actually now, because there's a reason for that. Sun, moon, and stars lined up. Everything works in that picture. And very hard to make a very good, great film. Very tough to do that, especially today. Today is much harder because you don't have the writers and you don't have the directors, but you have plenty of actors, great actors out there. But when it comes to writers and directors, you have to pick and choose because it's not that easy to find the real good ones. I'm not the only one who's saying that. I mean, this is pretty much talked about. As you see from the movies, a lot of the movies are 2-act movies. Because second act, third act is missing, or they're way too long because they don't know how to tell an editor, why don't you cut it down a bit? I mean, that's why we have editors. So it's a lot of stuff that you have to kind of go through and collaborate, because you can't give the director just 100% leverage, because no directors, there are many directors who are Picassos. What I'm trying to say to you is a director is dependent on the cast, his team, his crew, But some directors may think they can go beyond that. That to me doesn't work. Dude, as a filmmaker, you've got to listen and you've got to work with your team. And but that's what I look for. I'm a team player. I'm not a control freak, but I do, when I do want to make a film, I pick and choose a director, and I give him the leverage and the artistic license to go north. How are you going to go north? I don't mind, as long as you don't go south. You can go left a bit, right a bit. I hope they do a little rewrite. I hope they put their own fingerprints on it. Otherwise, if I don't have a director who's not going to put their fingerprints on a film, why do I need them for? I direct it. So that's what you got. I mean, I love the collaboration aspect of making films. Swap ideas, and it's nothing like it. It's just a great, it's like going to a camp and you're camping, you're having fun. Usually it's not much fun, but anyway.
Barry, you got me thinking about something that you said earlier about Paul Newman's comment to you reminded me about not being ready. Actually reminded me, just jogged my memory moments ago about a conversation you and I had on Sunset Boulevard, and I forgot the name of the restaurant in Hollywood, but I was showing you Justice for Hire stuff, and I think this is right around the time I think you were you were really supporting the development of the project. I think you hired some script. Well, I forgot the name. What is the name of that? When someone reads the script and gives you notes.
Well, script readers. They read and they give you comments, and
and gave some really phenomenal notes and on a path to the Justice for Hire feature film screenplay. And when I was talking about directing the film, which is something that coming out of film school, it was my senior thesis, and it was in my mind, and I had turned down some more independent production offers coming right out of school, and I wanted to do it on a grander scale. And I remember you telling me that I wasn't ready, and I remember how hard that was for me to hear. It was really hard for me to hear, because I was at that point feeling like I was pulling a truck worth of we were publishing comics to get the word out as for Justice for Hire to the mainstream. We were doing really well there. We had all these other things happening simultaneously, but I had to be involved in all of those. So I was spending less time working on the craft of directing, and I was aware of that. But then you called me out on it, and when you did that, I went into this kind of overdrive mode where I was like, I gotta direct everything now. So I started directing a bunch of music videos and some stuff that still isn't even cut to this day, which I still have on my to-do list because I don't want to leave anything undone. And it affected me immensely. But it was amazing to especially as I started realizing that Hollywood is a service industry. And what I mean by that is that you're serving the audience, the director, etc., who gets hired for the crew, like they're service providers. And that was something that I think that when you're in the artist mindset, you can easily forget that you're providing a service, and therefore the level of your craft in providing that service needs to be at a certain level, and that level needs to be maintained for you to be an option. I remember the term, I think you said I was not a bondable director at that time. And so I remember that, and I was like, okay, well, this is really, really interesting, because I know that I have the amount of access to creative and like independently sourced resources to train myself and get better, but there's still something that's missing from me providing a particular service to the industry in a particular way. And I think a lot of that that really catalyzed and I'm saying this as I'm thinking about it and feeling it as I'm talking to you, because it was a major moment in my life, because it really led to clarity on what we're doing with ReelwUrld, how we're doing justice for hire. I think when I was, when we got to the point where we had turned down several justice for hire offers because the offers were always without me as a director and were without myself or Mercer in the cast, it was like, well, why am I doing this? Like, what am I doing this for money? No, I'm not doing this for money. And so am I doing this for art? Well, if I'm doing this for art, I better have something really, really important to say. And when I realized that there were things that I couldn't say that culture needed to hear, it brought me back to that conversation with you, which is, Jan, you're not ready for this moment because there's something that there was something missing. And I wanted so much to find out what that missing thing was in years later, when I was still with the Justice for Hire project, and a whole bunch of things happened in life that made me to look back at it, and I realized that it was actually the audience. I'm like, the audience is missing from this, and we're at a point in culture where the audience can pick up their phone and actually create something with us. So the things that I want to say, like, I can say what I want to say, but the complete picture is not my voice. It's actually a unified voice. And that's where the concept, a lot of ideas, not just the, like JFH, but a lot of ideas that have been worked on for Creative Impulse that, you've been an advisor for years, my production company. And then of course, ReelwUrld as your advisor now, started to click and they started to come together. And it was really that concept of, if I'm not the director to make the, let's say, not so that I won't be the director to do the Hollywood version, but what we needed and what I think culture needs right now is a way for us to unite our stories. And you were instrumental in this is what I'm getting at, is that you were instrumental at catalyzing that realization that for me to serve personally, I had to do what I was I had to serve as I had been trained to serve. And so I had to really go back into my training and to understand, I've been trained with all this like unique filmmaking, etc., comic book, martial arts, like all these wonderful ecosystems. How can I present something to the world of value that someone else uses, receives value from it, and then wants to do it again? And recognizing what that thing was, and now it's certified in a concept called ReelwUrld, and in our first show, Justice for Hire, where anybody can join the cast, and now we have a global cast and people are joining every day.
Well, that's the beauty of what you're doing with this ReelwUrld, because that's why I was attracted to, that you're interacting with the audience, and that's brilliant. I mean, it's like, what's better than that, right? You're right there with the audience, working with. But look, in life, you have to earn it. And the word earned is so important. It's not like you couldn't go and do it, a Hollywood version or whatever, but you have to be ready to do it. You have to know what you're doing. It's called experience, we all go through it. And I look, I always say to a lot of friends when they ask their advice at some point, I've got to cut corners and get to the point. I think you had the passion and the desire, and I think in time you were learning at the same time, like we all go through in life, and that's where you are right now. That's the beauty of it compared to vis-a-vis 10, 15 years ago when we met.
Thank you for
well, that's so true, because that's why I think your vision is great. That's what you are today.
Well, it's putting us in a position to when it comes to, as you said, there are actors everywhere, and to be able to identify that, not just for actors, but creators everywhere, and to be able to say, hey, you know what, just take this thing and let's work together, and let's work together now. And it's putting us in a position, that eye-to-eye position, and it's, when it comes to the psychology, when it comes to how to sit down and work with talent, especially talent that may not have the formal training that we've had, it's a very unique skill that I'm realizing, because it's not something that's really done at all. Like we're doing it, and we're creating something. We're creating a new production position, because I do believe that the future of movies and television, much of it, there is going to be a community produced genre for all genres. There's going to be like just the social filmmaking is going to be its own thing. So it's really interesting sitting in this position and knowing that the challenges that we might be facing right now, that I'm facing as what I'm calling it an executive director, are challenges that other folks are going to have, but we'll be able to guide that process and to help people to do what we're doing with Justice for Hire, with multiple shows, multiple films.
Especially with the business that has changed drastically since the pandemic. It really has. To your advantage, by the way. Because it has. The business has changed drastically. That's why we're more and more relying on our social media and iPhone and instant kind of interaction. You know, the audiences today is different than, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. We've gone through, hell, the whole world has gone through it. Now poor Ukrainians are going through it. So, it's like, hello, I mean, like, but you know what? Storytelling is the storytelling. That's never going to stop. If you have a good story to tell, whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 hours, whatever, as long as you can execute it well and deliver it, there's always going to be an audience, because entertainment will never stop. That's the beauty of what we do. I didn't want to become a producer or producer. John Huston said to me, at the time when I was a kid, and I wanted to be a director, and I directed many programs or shorts that did quite well, but I want to do a feature. John said to me, look, why don't you become a creative filmmaker? I said, what do you mean by that? He said, become a creative producer. Pick the director, pick the writer, cast, basically become a conductor. And your own faith and destiny where it's going. And I never looked back to that. When I work with a director, I am an eye to eye with him. I'm trying to give him the vision he wants. So it's not like I'm not there. So I realized, the best thing for me to do is to become a creative filmmaker, producer. This is the reason why I'm working with Al, because Al gave me that leverage too. He respected my vision and said, I want to work with you, because Al has a choice of working with anyone. Because I also realized that I can share with him and help him bring his vision, rather than saying, here's a check, let's go make a picture, goodbye, and see you later, and blah, blah. So it's picking, choosing your content, or whatever you call it today, is the key. That's why I'm a believer of quality and not quantity. Because it's nothing like creating some kind of a legacy for yourself. If you can, look, it's the best beautiful thing you can leave an art behind. And so this has been a really interesting journey, and I hope in the next few years we'll follow up and see what else in the horizon.
I'm always so grateful for you, and I want to open it up before we finish up to questions from
Okay.
So if anyone's got a question right now, Andre's got a question. Let me pin you guys. Add pin, and I will mute.
Hi, Barry. Great seeing you again. And
Hi.
thank you so much for this. It's captivating. I could listen to you hours. There's something that I noticed in everything that you said, and there's a commitment to excellence in everything that you told us. And where do you think that commitment to excellence comes from? From your passion, your dedication, or from how your work was received? Like, did you let yourself be led by the success, or just by that inner passion that you had for the filmmaking? That's the first question. And the second question, because I'm also European, and never in my life as a 4-year-old watching movies I would have dreamt of getting to Hollywood and working on this with Jan. Being in between Europe and Hollywood, it made you stay true to the art of filmmaking. So by being in that, what do you think is threatening it at this moment? Is the technology threatening the art, or is it enhancing and supporting the art? Those are the two questions. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, your first question was basically kind of answered second question in a way. It is about the art. It is about the passion combination, because I always felt as a kid growing up, it's not that I don't enjoy watching a pure commercial picture. I call that art as well, by the way. I'm not against any of that, but I think ultimately passion and desire and at the big, especially at the beginning, before you get to a level of where I got to, was I was listening. I wasn't interrupting. I wasn't kind of trying to be a big shot and, you know, all that stuff that I see, unfortunately, sometimes the young filmmakers try to jump to that conclusion of how it's all done. With my situation was about sitting back and just embracing knowledge, learning from these. I was blessed. I was, as I said, I was very lucky. And as far as what today, with regard to art, look, the beauty of technology today, anyone can make a film. The downside is everyone is doing it because it's convoluted by so many product and content. It's like trying to go to a warehouse full of, you know, commodities or whatever, and then you want to try and find that couple of diamonds. There's so much out there, so much. Whereas, as I said, 20 years ago, even just up to 15 years ago, when the technology of digital wasn't that great, it was more of a struggle to make a film. As I said, you had to be such a show off. I remember as a kid when I was saying I'm making my first 35 millimeter film. It was a major achievement because we're all doing it 60 millimeter. Today, it's like, as I said, really audiences have ADD. They don't really care much about the length of a movie as long as they're just entertained. If it's too long, obviously, it just doesn't work as well. But the art aspect of art is there. I mean, honestly, probably more of that is there. It's just we don't find it because there's so much going on. There's so many great films out there that we don't even get to see, especially foreign movies, because they way ahead of the movies they make here. They make more movies now outside the United States for many reasons. Union, you know, because you can do a lot of pictures in Europe without the problem of the union in this country. That's why they make less movies here. And at the same time, you know, people make movies in an unorthodox fashion in Europe, Asia, wherever, because there's no formula and they don't know anything about formula. So they go out there and organically make a film. Once in a while here in the United States, you get to see a great drama or dramedy like Coda, which is right now out there. It's a great film. Now, not that they can't make it here, it's just they don't want to make those kind of films. I mean, I know in Hollywood, they're great filmmakers. It's just, they just think of other, you know, material. They make, you know, other great stuff, perhaps, I don't know. But in Europe, certainly outside the United States, they filmmakers that I meet, whether they're from my home country, Iran, and they make great films and they win Oscars left and right, by the way. They don't know anything. I remember when I went to Iran 7 years ago and met a lot of great filmmakers there. And they said, you know, what do you think we should do? What kind of movies do you think we should compete with Bollywood? I said, no, just make the movies that you're good at. Tell the human tale, the stories you're good at. And they're very good at doing that. But you can't expect to go to an Iranian filmmaker out of Iran today and say, why don't you go out there and make Superman? They wouldn't even know how to begin. And so is it like one is driving a Fiat Uno, a beautiful car, a little car, and one is driving a Ferrari. But they're both good cars. You just have to know your limitation as an artist. So I do believe that there's the art out there is there. It's just, and also there are more streamers, meaning outlets. I mean, we didn't have that 5 years ago. It was just theatrical here and there and television, ancillary, and that's it. So, you know, today, even your cable system, Spectrum is making movies. Direct TV, they're making films. Everyone is creating content. So I'm pretty optimistic. I have to say. You just need to keep at it. Keep making them, and hopefully you find a window somewhere, people to see.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Barry, so much for this amazing.
It's been great. It's been great seeing you. I haven't seen you for a while, so I hope to see you in person sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, man. This we'll post this tomorrow, and for anybody who is of course, check out this is the Value Add Podcast. This is ReelwUrld, the Value Add Podcast. We do this every few weeks, and always talking to amazing human beings that we can all learn from, that are part of our network. And Barry has taught me personally so much, and I'm just so grateful, Barry, to have you. And
thank you so much. Happy to be in your company, man. I wish you all the best, and be healthy, and everybody be well. And I hope to see you soon.
Oh, where can people, if anyone wants to reach out, what's the best way to connect?
Connect with me?
Yeah.
To connect with me, it's best to go through you, because I am, at the end of the day. Not that I don't want to be connected with people, but look, I mean, Instagram, of course, and so on. But the best way really is to people who want to connect, if there's anything they have, or scripts and everything. I mean, I'm more than always happy to read, but it's always great to go through you, because you're my kind of agent out there.
Well, you heard it here, guys.
All right.
If you want to be a part of our first show, Justice for Hire, go to justiceforhire.app. You can join the cast as a hero, as a villain, or as a client that hires heroes and villains. And we are doing live editing of the Justice for Hire show every day on Twitch. I will be on Twitch later on tonight, twitch.tv/justiceforhire, editing the show. And the only way to submit scenes for the show, to be in the show, is to go through justiceforhire.app. So go and become a cast member, and it's going to be great. Also, wefunder.com/ReelwUrld, ReelwUrld, is where you'll find what we're doing with ReelwUrld, building the world's first social film studio. Our whole purpose is to make movies and shows with the world. So if you want to invest in the company, own a part of what we're building, and help us grow, that's the place to do it. wefunder.com/ReelwUrld, ReelwUrld, because you're in it. And once again, I'm Jan. We've had Barry Navidi today. Thank you, everybody, for showing up and for the great questions and the great stories, Barry. And
thank you, man. Pleasure. Great.